Alright guys, TacticalRab here again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Every so often in the Call of Duty landscape we get the question about the Mount Rushmore of Call of Duty. Which 4 players best represent either the best versions of Call of Duty players you can get, or in terms of influence for the game in general. Nadeshot and Scump are discussing it, and Nadeshot says that can you just put all the old heads on there anymore? The guys that have won the 3 World Championships. Have times changed to some degree? Are newer players more deserving than some of the old school guys? What exactly would you guys come up with in the comments below? Very much interested in your thoughts down there. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Cool to see aBeZy as well, giving his props to Crim, of course, for another double event victory this weekend at the Circuit of the Americas, which was, what a great circuit. aBeZy says, man is just doing it all at this point. Congrats, he says. But speaking of FaZe, I wanted to mention a few things on them. Firstly, on the overall player card numbers for the stage without the adjustment, right? So if you guys are unaware, when you do the player card analysis, you get an adjustment based on your win-loss. So Scrappy was at a 97, but he got, a plus adjustment factor because they won a lot. But he got to a 99 because they won a lot, as did, for example, Dashy. Simp is up here, and we'll certainly discuss Simp in a second because he is a name that Nadeshot mentions on the whole Mount Rushmore discussion. But this is kind of, I wouldn't say unbiased because the performance of the team does matter in terms of their results. But I thought it was interesting to look at some of the names that get boosted here on the weaker teams. For example, Beans' card was a 90 rated before the, the Boston adjustment factor, which went considerably down, which was pretty impressive. I mean, a 90 rated card is certainly up there. Like, these are the with no change, no adjustment factor votes. TJ Halley as well, 88 rated, same as aBeZy, same as Kenny. I think TJ's had a really great comeback season, actually. Like, look, his KD might not be the best, but in terms of search and destroy impact, in terms of impact in the other modes, I think TJ's been, honestly, maybe his best year in quite some time. So I wonder how it would have gone, because ReeaL, who had an 82 overall, but of course was really good towards the end of the stage, would have been really interesting to see if he'd have actually stayed on Ravens had they got the visa stuff sorted. But I honestly think that maybe in hindsight, chemistry and communication, these other factors, maybe TJ actually makes more sense in the end. Those are your top 10. MettalZ is here at an 88. When we go down to the bottom of the league, it gets kind of ugly, but maybe it gets better, I suppose, for some players. It does tighten the pack to some extent, just because you'll find that the adjustment factor of the bottom teams puts some guys really in the mud. Like aBeZy was on a 53, which is not pretty, obviously, but that's why he went down to a 48 overall, was because he lost 5 matches with the Las Vegas Legion. The other interesting stat on FaZe that was causing controversy yesterday was this one. Atlanta FaZe win-loss on certain days that aren't the Championship Sunday. On every other day that isn't Champ Sunday, they win 80.3% of their games. Over 80%. They are 139 to 34 in every other day. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But on the Championship Sunday, their record is only 23 and 22, which is rather, if I'm another team seeing this, and I'm seeing that actually FaZe only win half of their series on Champ Sunday. Like, I'm really buzzing about that. Now, this shouldn't be a massive surprise that there's a delta here between every other day and Champ Sunday, whether it's World Championship or whatever, because it's harder to win on Champ Sunday because the top 4 teams are there. Like, every single team you're going to find is going to have a worse win-loss, I would say, on Championship Sunday than they will on the other days, because you're playing the other 3 top teams. And if you're FaZe, you're almost certainly a winners finals, which means you're probably playing the second best team, if not, the very worst, the third best team. So your record is always going to be worse. It's just the extent of how, bad it is that is the question mark, right? Because can you compare this to other teams? Now, if we got these numbers for even like the OpTic Dynasty, it'd be interesting to see how Crim, Scump, Karma, Formal fared in terms of, their Championship Sunday results compared to this FaZe team. We do have this, though, from the CDL era. So looking at the CDL teams, what are their records? For example, when you consider OpTic Texas, they're 10-9, which is pretty similar to FaZe's records. Chicago OpTic, Chicago Huntsman, smaller sample size there. Dallas Empire, yes, it was online cheese in part, but they're at 15-10 series win rates of 60%. That's kind of where you want to get to, really. I mean, obviously, as we go further down, we have smaller sample sizes for teams like London, teams like Paris, who made Championship Sunday back in MW19, but it doesn't really count. And to be fair, Ravens actually made Championship Sunday at the start of Vanguard, right, when they got that top 3 at the first major, but didn't really go to plan. Boston have made it, but you know, they're 0-3 when they have. The best win rate actually here is Gorillas, which is pretty funny. They're 3-1. Florida Mutineers, which is pretty funny because of course they've made it a little bit back in the day in MW19 where they made a few championship Sundays and did rather well. They won a fair few of them. To be fair though, FaZe are the only team to appear twice on this list of the highest team KD in a grand final series ever for like the entire team. The record of course is New York at Champs last year when they just dismantled Toronto Ultra. Toronto do appear here though for Major 3 last year in the finals. FaZe have 2 appearances. This is only LAN by the way. So Atlanta 2020 was on LAN just before it went online. I think there was the Atlanta event, then there was like an LA event that Dallas won and like the home series, right? Then it all went online. FaZe also did this at Major 2 2023, so this is all on LAN, but you know, the Subliners one is still impressive. And of course OpTic Texas here at Major 3 2024, they slot into 2nd place of all time with a 1.21 overall team KD in the finals. So you know, this was against Toronto, this was against Toronto. It's the storyline that we mentioned the other day. But let's talk about this Mount Rushmore stuff, because it was even a talking point in Black Ops 6 when this is one of parts of the teaser trailer for it. But every so often in CoD, we talk about the current Mount Rushmore. Who are the 4 most deserving players on the list? And Nadeshot clarifies in the replies that like his real list is somewhat different to who he mentions here. So, you know, it was difficult to find exactly what he went on to say. I wish he'd said in the replies that what his actual top 4 is. And it's difficult to say. And obviously he's going to consider Karma and Clayster and these other guys as well. But I just thought the discussion was interesting on Nadeshot throws in a couple of other names that you might not expect, not necessarily to his like overall guaranteed top 4 like, you know, hot take list, but just kind of the general idea that is it the same as it was 2 years ago? Because a couple of years ago, I think the Mount Rushmore was relatively clear, but times have changed in the last 2 years. People have retired, people are doing other things. Other guys have way more championship victories now, at least a few more than they did a couple of years ago. The scene is different now to how it was back then. There aren't so many events to win, and all these other questions. So, you know, Nadeshot's feeling is that maybe times have changed to some extent.
Yo, Nadeshot. If you had to make a Mount Rushmore for CoD, who's on it?
Mount Rushmore for CoD, who's on it?
Yeah. Nadeshot.
You, and that's tough, bro. I don't know. You can't have Formal on there, bro. He came in too late. He can't be on Mount Rushmore. I'm tripping for that.
Flip it.
Nah, I'm serious. Like, he just wasn't in for long enough.
I know, I'm just trolling.
I'd probably put you up. You, Crim6.
And there's different ones. It's like there's influence, and then there's like one for like.
Yeah,
the GOATs.
You do players, owners,
you know what I'm
fucking.
saying?
Yeah.
Throw Hector. Who else should you put? Matt. I guess you got to put yourself.
Man, I'm really about to be egotistical and shit right now. I'm just gonna do players. I'm saying Crim, Scump. I honestly, I probably gotta put Simp up there.
Holy shit, Simp the pimp getting a shout.
I feel like Simp deserves it at this point.
The absolute pimp himself.
And Chris probably a good shout.
And it's weird not to put aBeZy with him, but like Simp kind of covers those 2 things. I low key, just out of their success from all the teams that and games that they've won on now, bro, I might even put Kenny up there.
Holy shit, Kenny. Quavo Ken getting a
won
shout.
for LA Thieves, TK, OpTic. He's won in every like era of CoD, basically.
So what's your okay? Let's hear it. You said it's me, Simp, Kenny, and Grim.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of I always say it out loud. You kind of put me on the spot here.
I don't know about that one, champion.
I'm just trying to account for so many different things. I'm trying too hard.
Just let it flow. Let it flow. Let it flow through you.
Shut the fuck up, Ben.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm trying too hard. Sorry.
I don't know why I agreed with him, Ben. Get on him, Ben. Get on him, Ben.
I'm just instigating, bro. I get instigated a lot.
Karma should be up there because he won 3 majors.
Do.
Just Crim and Seth are too close. I can't just put all old heads.
You can absolutely just put all old heads.
But I guess the Mount Rushmore is the old people that are dead.
So this was one of the go-to Mount Rushmores, you know, a couple of years ago. This was made by David here back in 2022 with Clay, Karma, Scump, and Crim6, which I think was kind of one of the go-to Mount Rushmores if you look at it from the pure, you know, achievements perspective. Formal, I think, probably misses out on most people's because he didn't compete in the grand scheme for that long. He was obviously phenomenal while he did compete, but he was only competing from Ghosts until, you know, Cold War, which is several seasons, obviously. End of Ghost into the end of Cold War. It's like, you know, 8 or so seasons, but he maybe wasn't around as long as some of these other guys and didn't achieve quite the same championship numbers. You know, 1-time world champion as opposed to 3-time for these other guys. And of course, Scump is always going to be there on pure skill and success and talent. There's also the influence part. If you want to consider mine, I would have Nadeshot on it. Like, I think mine would be Scump, Nades, and then you go from there. Just in terms of, like, the importance of those guys to the scene, Nadeshot would be on my Mount Rushmore. But you can look at it a number of ways. They obviously discuss that as well, as Scump says. Like, are you going pure skill? Are you going pure accolades? Are you going, like, importance to the scene? Because if you're doing that, it is another question entirely. But one of the points that Nadeshot was making was, do you need to represent the newer era to some degree? Because, you know, I'm sure many would say if you're going to make a Mount Rushmore based on pure skill or pure accolades, you're still looking at this Mount Rushmore. Like, Scump's still going to be there. Crim obviously hasn't gone anywhere at all because, you know, only retired a little while ago and, you know, still 3-time world champion. No one else apart from these guys are 3-time world champions. Simp may get there over the coming years. He probably will, to be honest. When he does, how does that change the conversation? But when, assuming that Simp wins the championship this year or next year, becomes a 3-time world champion, he still won't have anywhere near the event victories of these guys. He still won't have anywhere near probably the, you know, championship Sunday win rate of these guys. So, you know, but it was a different time back then, obviously. There was more events and these other things. Maybe it's more competitive today, although, you know, there's some dispute on whether that's fair or not. But it's like, when does this change, right? Because this is 2 years ago, and if I had to make this again today, I'd probably do the same thing. But I always wonder for myself, like, am I too past biased in some respects? Like, what is it going to take for these guys to actually climb the rankings? For example, where does Simp and aBeZy fit on the all-time CoD players list? Like, they're probably in the top 10 now, maybe Simp's even in the top 5. But, you know, are they quite close enough to be, you know, really challenging the absolute old heads, the veterans? Because Ben says, look, maybe you still camp at the old, you know, the veterans there until somebody really knocks them off their perch, which is probably fair enough. Now, Kenny, you know, throwing that name in there, obviously, maybe Thieves biased to some degree, they're Nadeshots, but maybe, you know, Kenny a couple more years, it might not be out of the realms of possibility for Kenny to kind of get into this ballpark if he was to, you know, win another world championship or 2 or something like that over the next couple of titles, especially to do so with OpTic. That could, you know, you could make a case for that. And maybe in some sense, Kenny would therefore represent some sort of newer gen version of CoD. Yes, Kenny's been around a while. I mean, he was only, what, 16 when he started competing back in Advanced Warfare, had to take some time out before the return in World War II, of course, when he became old enough to actually compete again. But maybe having Kenny in there, if, you know, the next couple of years goes well, respects to some degree what is happening nowadays, rather than, you know, how things were in the past. You know, having somebody maybe represent in some sense the CDL era, rather than, you know, these guys that won their championships and events mostly pre-CDL. Maybe there's something to be said for that. But also, you've only got 4 slots here, right? And who do you replace in that moment, right? Can you replace Clay, for example, who's still competing, still, you know, 3-time world champion, still making runs in events, maybe not so deep as he was back in the day, but like Clay is still, in terms of influence and accolades, to me, is on there. Then do you get rid of Karma, right? But it feels kind of, you know, Karma's still the first ever and the only 3-time LAN world champion. So it's like, when you've got 4 spots, it's so difficult, which is probably why I'm leading the way of just kind of leaving it as it was. Like, until somebody really comes along and does something spectacular to prove they deserve these spots over somebody else, then, you know, it is what it is. Obviously, here's Scrappy back in February at the Boston Major talking about, you know, who's the Mount Rushmore of the trash talkers. Obviously, Aix was even a name that's been thrown around as well in that conversation, just because of Aix's importance to the early part of the scene. Like, Aix might make the case that if you're going to put Scump there and Nadeshot there, the scene wouldn't have been the same without Aix. Like, that personality, that rivalry that they had helped grow the scene massively, the villain of the era. So there's even an argument that Aix could be on there as well. But I guess my feeling is that it's going to take quite a lot, and probably a few more years maybe, for some of these current guys to solidify their place on there instead of some of the other ones. But like, for those that have not been around so long as fans of the scene, then it might be a different story for them. So very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Busted the nut after though. Busted the nut. Nut got busted everywhere. But he busted the nut all over fucking TSA.
Entirely meter 1 meter 2 meter 3, like I felt like you
No Diddy, no straight Diddy.